I believe that the very cosmos itself is a theater, and human life is a fractal of that. And so for the third reading today, I've chosen a passage from Shakespeare, As You Like It. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. And then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like a furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honour, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good cape and lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice, turning again towards childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all that ends this strange eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. Words inspired by God. So typically each month I take a theme for the month and I develop it in the first 2 Sundays. And then on the 3rd Sunday, I do a recap and a Q&A. And then the 4th Sunday, it's a member from the community leads the Eucharist. But last Sunday was the 5th Sunday of the month. And so I decided to do what I call a one and done, a basketball term. But as I reflected during the week, I figured that I needed to go into this topic in more detail. So last Sunday, I looked at the life of Jesus before, during, and after being a carpenter in Nazareth, and about the average human being, who you were before, during, and after this current incarnation. But as I thought about it during the week, it felt to me like I want to take a deeper dive into this topic. And so I decided to take it as a theme for February. I want to go much, much deeper into this. So if I were to give this theme a title, I would call it Heaven, Finding Our Way Home. And so what I want to do today is I want to look at some versions of this process, what I'm going to call the Ascension process. I want to dig deeper into different versions, by different people over the ages about, what happens to us in the course of an incarnation or before it or after it, except I'm going to take a cosmological look at it. And I'm going to call each of these stages of each version, I'm going to call them sacraments, because I believe they are sacraments. And if I were to define what I mean by sacrament, I would say that it is the mindful ritualization of the significant shifts in both status and obligation of the initiate vis-a-vis the wider community. So there are 2 things happening in the sacrament. The status of the initiate changes and the obligations change. And then the sacrament itself is a ritualizing of this, a mindful ritualizing it, because the status and the obligations of the initiate are changing vis-a-vis the wider community. And I believe that each of these versions that I'll offer this morning, they have different numbers of stages. So I'm going to just look at different versions of this process. So let me start with a kind of a 4-stage model. And this would be kind of like a brief psychological model of what it means to move through life. And I would say that it has 4 stages. The first one I'm going to call self-awareness. And that would be from birth until about age 7. Where the young child is identified with the ego. So there's an identification with the spacesuit, with its physicality, emotionality, intellectuality, and personality. So maybe for the first 7 years, that's the identification. I call that stage self-awareness. And then beginning around age 7, and maybe from age 7 to age 12, is what I would call the self-regulation stage. At this stage, the child is learning the rules and the roles that are being assigned to it, by its society. And also, it's going to identify with what I would call the role self, the character it's being told it needs to play in this particular incarnation. And that goes on until about the age of 12. And then if we're lucky, the third stage kicks in, and it's self-reflection, beginning around the age of 12. And we develop some kind of critical thinking. We begin to look at the society of which we're a part and the rules and the roles we played up to then, and we begin to think critically about them. And so now there's a possible identification, not just with the role self, but maybe with the soul self, the kind of the holographic fractal of source that you are. And then if you're really, really lucky, and it's not going to happen in every incarnation, but at some stage, the fourth stage I would call self-transcendence. And at this stage, you're beginning to identify with the source self, not even the soul self, and certainly not the role self, and certainly not the spacesuit, but with source itself. So that would be like a quick 4-stage model of this ascension process. Let me pick up then on a 5-stage model. And this was a model that was proposed by the great Chinese sage Confucius, who flourished about 550 BCE. And he talked about 5 constant relationships that basically create your life journey during the entire incarnation. And the 5 constant relationships, he said, was firstly, the relationship between husband and wife. Secondly, the relationship between parents and children. Thirdly, the relationship between the elder brother and the younger siblings. The fourth one was the relationship between the teacher and the student. And the fifth one was between the emperor and the subject. And he claimed that life could be understood by locating yourself in these 5 kind of different relationships, and that was the ascension process as you identified and played your role in each of these. So that would be a 5-stage model. There's a beautiful 6-stage model that I've mentioned many times, and it comes from the Gospel of Thomas. And Thomas is talking about, how we progress spiritually. And this could be over many, many, many incarnations. And he puts it this way, he says, those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. And when they find, they will be disturbed, stage 3. And when they are disturbed, they will marvel, stage 4. And when they marvel, they will rule. And then finally, when they rule, they will rest. And what he's saying is that the purpose of incarnation is to look around for what was the mission for which you volunteered when you came in here. And when you find out what that mission is, stage 2, you're going to be really, really disturbed, because it is not the mission that your parents or your society has been telling you. It is a totally different mission. It is the mission, nothing less than developing Christ consciousness. So you're going to be really, really disturbed, because you're going to realize that you've been living an illusion, a societally created illusion. And that's very disturbing. It's like your reality model has been pulled out from beneath you. So many people will run back immediately to the old self-image. It's too dangerous. It's too much hard work. And so you retreat. But if you have the courage to be disturbed, the next stage, the 4th stage is, you will marvel. The scales will begin to fall from your eyes, and you'll begin to see that you, and in fact, the world is living in an illusion, that we're separate entities, that we're separate from God, that we're separate from nature, and that we're separate from each other. And that will lead to the 5th stage, which is you will rule. Not in the sense that you will have control like a despot over other people, but that you will have total command of your own journey. And then the 6th stage is, now you can rest. Not in the sense that you kind of give up trying, but that you found the road, and now you just continue along that road. So that would be like a 6-stage model. Or what does 7-stage model look like? It's the model that was proposed to us if we were raised Catholic. It was a 7-stage model of the 7 sacraments. And so you had baptism, First Holy Communion, confirmation, the sacrament of reconciliation, marriage, ordination to priesthood, and then the last rites. And so that's kind of stepping you through the kind of chronologically through life. And properly understood and properly celebrated, it is really, really beautiful. It's the society recognition of your change in status and the change in your responsibilities and obligations. Properly understood, not your obligations just to the group or even to kind of Roman Catholicism or Christianity, but your responsibility to planet Earth. and to the mission for which you came. So these can be marks along the road where society is ritualizing your progress. But for most of us, again, it's kind of just, it's empty ritual. We don't fully understand it. I always remember as a child, you know, when you made your first communion, the day after, and you went back to school, and the first question everybody asked was, how much did you make? Because you went around to visit all your cousins and aunts, and they all gave you a few bob. And so the whole object of the exercise was to figure out how much money could you make on your first Holy Communion day. I don't think we really got it. That would be a 7-stage model. And then I started off the reading this morning with Shakespeare's version of a 7-stage model. And basically he's saying it's infancy, schoolboy, teenager, young man, middle age, old age, and death. And Shakespeare, being the extraordinary playwright that he is, he's putting it in the metaphor of a play on stage. You know, so we're stepping through these, and that life itself is a stage. But, you know, it's a kind of a dire version of what our purpose is. He certainly, in this particular play, he didn't really get it, that the mission is not just about chronologically advancing until finally you give up. As he says, sans eyes, sans teeth, sans hair, sans everything. Sans meaning without. You lost your vision. You're not hearing anymore. Your health is gone. So it's a very kind of downer version of life. But that was his version. There's an 8-stage model that was created by a very interesting psychologist called Erik Erikson, and it was the 8 stages of psychosocial development. And he, again, it's a chronological model where you look at various stages of the person's life, and you figure out what is the kind of the invitation, and what is the downside of each of these stages. So the first one, from about age 12 months to 18 months, infancy, he says it's about trust versus mistrust. Depending on what your environment, what your home environment is like, and how you're parented, you learn to kind of trust life and to reach out to life and to carpe diem, or you'll mistrust everything because you've been so badly treated as a little child by your caregivers that you don't trust anything. So that would be the first stage, according to Erik Erikson. The second stage is about from 18 months to about 3 years, and he called it autonomy versus shame and doubt. This is when you're going to be potty trained. And so depending on how that process goes, you know, and how you're rewarded or punished or screamed at during the potty training, you're going to have autonomy and feel, I can do it. I'm a big boy. Look, mama, I just went to the bathroom on my own. Or be shamed and doubted because, you know, you soiled your underwear. So that would be the second stage for him. Stage 3, he called it initiative versus guilt. We're now talking about ages 3 to about age 5. Now the child is kind of preschool or just beginning a preschool. And now, depending on how the school environment is, the child is going to develop initiative and take chances and be creative, or be guilty because it's going to get your red marks all over his page. So that'll be the next stage. The fourth one he called industry versus inferiority. Now you're talking about age 5 to 12. You're in grade school. And now you're going to really work hard if teachers know how to treat you properly, if they can identify what your strengths are, or else you're going to have inferiority because you're the last guy in the class. You get the lowest grades each time. And so you kind of give up. What's the point in trying? I can never make it to the top or even into the 50 percentile. So that's the stage from about 5 to 12. The next one he called identity versus role confusion. And that's typically from about age 12 to 18. So now we're talking about our teen years. And at this stage, particularly, there's a lot of stuff around gender and how we're being treated in this way, what roles we're playing, you know, in life as well, you know, in our home situation, in the school situation. Are you on the football team in school? You know, are you a cheerleader in school? So what is your identity during those 6 years? The next stage he called intimacy versus isolation. And this is a big span. This is about from age 18 to about 40. And has to do with the quality of your relationships and your professional life. How are you kind of giving back to society? What are you doing? And so it's intimacy where you feel really supported and important, or you feel isolated because there's no special person in your life, or you don't seem to have found out what your vocation is. You feel like you're not contributing anything to society. And then the next stage is, he called it generativity versus stagnation. And now we're talking from about age 40 to about 65. And this has to do with your sense of legacy. What are you bequeathing to society as you move into the final stages of life? Are you being generative in the sense that you're supporting, and being creative at this stage of your life? Are you stagnating? You're in a job you don't like, you're in a relationship that you hate, you've given up on relationships. So this is your legacy period. And then the final stage he suggested was integrity versus despair. So this is the 65 plus. And the objective of this stage, unlike what Shakespeare said, is about the accumulation of wisdom. So it's either integrity versus despair. You feel like you've learned through life, that you don't just have knowledge, but that you have wisdom. And I've defined the difference many times between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is just data which is kind of generated by the sensorium and processed by the brain, whereas wisdom is data which is generated by the soul and processed by the heart. So this is the stage for the development of wisdom. So that for me is a really, really beautiful model, Erik Erikson's model, 8 stages. So now I'm going to stretch completely, because this was a model I developed myself about 20 years ago. And it's not a 4-stage model, it's not a 5-stage model, it's not even an 8-stage model, it's a 23-stage model. So for me, there are 23 great sacraments in this entire cosmological evolution. And there are kind of, I believe, 7 kinds of phases in these 23 stages, and we oscillate backwards and forwards between them. And I was just thinking actually this week, how would I define these 7 different kinds of phases? So one kind I would call Deo-centric. It's focused on God. And 3 of my stages fall into that category. The second one I would call Cosmo-centric, where we're focused on the very universe itself. And I believe there are 7 stages devoted to that. The next one I call Gaia-centric. It's, how we put Gaia or Pachamama or planet Earth in the center of our thinking. And for me, there are 2 stages in this model devoted to that. The next one I call Anthropo-centric, focused on the human species qua species. And for me, there's 1 stage involved in that particular piece. The next one I call Ethno-centric, which I'm focused on the tribe, on the group, on the nation. And for me, I devoted 3 of the stages to that piece. The second last one I call the Duo-centric. It has to do with a particularly significant relationship, like a spouse or a child. And so for me, there are 3 kind of stages involved there. And then the final one is ego-centric, where it's all about me. And there are 4 stages in that process. So altogether, I believe there are about 23 stages in process. So I'm going to walk through them fairly slowly and tell you what they mean. So the very first stage in this evolutionary process, I believe, is that very first sacrament is where God self-fractures into individual fractal souls, what Judaism will call netzotzim, sparks of the divine. And you'll find this in Kabbalah very definitely. And so it is God, in order to generate experiences, having to self-fracture, into various kind of manifestations. And that's the very first sacrament as far as I'm concerned. The second great sacrament then is these netzotzim, or these individual souls. Some of them, they volunteer for incarnation in various places all over the cosmos. And I like to take one of Jesus' statements where he says, there is more joy in heaven over 1 sinner who repents than over 99 who do not need repentance. But I change that and I say, there is more joy in heaven over 1 soul who incarnates than over 99 souls who stay at home. It takes a very courageous soul to kind of strike out, on its own, and to risk, forgetting who it really is. So I would call this stage then, it's a Cosmo-centric, stage. Now I am trying to evolve the very cosmos itself by becoming part of it, I'm volunteering for incarnation. So that would be kind of the second sacrament. The third one I call the launching pad. And this is where souls gather to be kind of finally briefed, on the locations for which they're volunteering. So some of us are coming to planet Earth, others are going to different areas, some are coming into physical realms, some are coming into more kind of esoteric or metaphysical realms. So this cosmological pad, or this third sacrament, is also a cosmocentric, because we're trying to benefit the entire cosmos, the entire universe. The next stage, the fourth sacrament, I call docking with the embryo. Now, those of us who volunteered for Life on Planet Earth, we're now going to dock, with a fertilized egg in the womb of a mother. So this docking process, again, for me, is a cosmo-centric stage where I'm coming in order to be of benefit, not just to the immediate family, but in fact to the cosmos itself. And then the fifth sacrament I would call the birth and the first breath, the Hebrew notion of ruach yaveh. And so it's interesting that breath is the creative process, that when God creates, Adam and Eve, he breathes into them. And Pentecost was about breathing the Spirit. So ruach yaveh, or the breath of God, announces, the arrival of a new entity. And so that for me is the fifth sacrament, the birth and the first breath. And again, this is cosmocentric, because you're doing this, not just for your own family, you're doing this for the cosmos, that God might generate experiences. Now we take a joint step backwards. The next sacrament, number 6 for me, is the development of the ego. And this typically happens around the age of 8 months for a child. Now, for the first time, the child begins to realize there's not just the mother-child complex. It's not just one complex, and I'm in charge of it. I shout, mother comes. The terrible realization that mother and I are separate. It's horrific to the little child, because mother could abandon him at any stage. So at this stage, we set up all these defense mechanisms, various ways, in order to try to level the playing field. So I can act really, really cutesy to make sure mother loves me and continues to love me, or I can scream bloody murder to get control of mother. So the arrival of the ego would be sacrament number 6. And we've gone right back to egocentric considerations. Number 7 would be the toddler stage. And now you've joined Homo erectus. You're able to stand upright, just like our ancestors did maybe 6 million years ago. And now you're the toddler. And again, it's all focused completely on me. This is very, very definitely egocentric stage as well. Sacrament number 7 is the development of speech. We begin to articulate for the first time. Typically, we begin around 18, 19, 20 months, and we're developing these skills. So now we've literally joined Homo sapiens sapiens. Homo sapiens sapiens only arrived on the scene about 70,000 years ago. Homo sapiens existed for about 200,000 years. It was intelligent, but it didn't have language. So language is the ability to think about thinking. And that only arrived 70,000 years ago with Homo sapiens sapiens. So the average child is going to develop that around age 18 months to maybe 2 years. But very, very definitely, again, this is very definitely egocentric. The child is using this to understand itself and to kind of have some kind of measure of control over its own life and the life of the family. Number 9 is the development, the terrible twos. No, and me, and mine. So this is the deep, deep dive into separation from source. This maybe is one of the low points where we're totally separate. We've separated even from mother and from father. We're separated from God. We're separated from everybody else. And it's all about me. So this is a deep, deep, deep dive of separation from source. That'll be sacrament number 9. Number 10 then is when we learn to think rationally. So we're talking about maybe age 7 here. So as I said previously, this is where we're told what the rules of the game are and what the roles are that we're expected to play. And this is foisted on us by the family, by our teachers, and by our community. So now it's dragging us out of our egocentric considerations into our ethno-centric. We're now identified with a tribe of some kind, and our duty is to the tribe. We have to put the tribe ahead of the individual. And that lasts for maybe 6, 7, 8 years. And then we go backwards again with the onset of puberty, which I would call sacrament number 11. So now we're sexually mature. And now society is going to really clamp down on us, because it's with prohibitions and constraints and laws and hypocrisy. This is perhaps the area in life in which there's the most constraint, the more laws, the most prohibitions, and the most hypocrisy on the part of society. But for the individual child, again, the focus is back on me. It's gone back from ethnocentric, the tribe, back to me and my sexual needs. That would be number 11, I think. Number 12 would be a self-reflection. So now the child is beginning to question his own behavior and the behavior of the culture, and to question and criticize the culture's values. Now, at this stage, I begin to challenge the tribal stories, whether we're talking about historical stories, theological stories or cosmological stories. And so we're going now from an ethnocentric worldview to a Gaia-centric worldview. We're now concerned about the very planet itself and life forms on the planet. So that's a very, very interesting, number 12 is a very, very interesting movement. Number 13, I would call, romantic friendship. And this is a duo-centric. Now there's a focus not on this individual ego, not on the tribe, not on the cosmos, but on a romantic relationship. Just me, and whoever I'm in love with. That would be number 13. Number 14, I believe, then will be the committed long-term relationship. This is different from the puppy love of number 13. This is number 14 now. And it's about a long-term committed relationship, which may lead to a kind of a socially sanctioned union, marriage in some way. And again, this is duo-centric. It's about me and the person with whom I'm in love. That would be number 14, I believe. Number 15, I would call profession. Now I'm trying to contribute to society. What am I going to do on behalf of society? How can I make my tribe more successful? And so I'm going to move now into an ethnocentric from just a duo-centric and thinking about the larger group again. Until the first child arrives. I would call this sacrament number 16. So with the arrival of the first child, I think there's a tendency to go back again to the duo-centric. It's me and my baby, and I'll kill to protect my child. I'm not that interested in the tribe anymore. I'm interested in making sure that my baby survives. And so this is kind of duo-centric at this stage. Number 17, I would call the birth of the first grandchild. And now something very, very beautiful happens. Now at this stage, the duo-centric version of me looking after my baby, I begin to realize now as a grandparent that I have a commitment to protecting and nurturing all of the children of the world. And so this, I would call this Anthropo-centric. It's focused on all humans everywhere, and particularly all children everywhere. So at this stage, I may be volunteering or sending money to or speaking up, for children in Africa, or any other parts of the world. So that would be number 17 for me. Sacrament number 18, I would then call embracing the entire planet and all of her life forms, not just all humans on the planet, but all life forms. And now again, I would call this a kind of a Gaia-centric sacrament. I've widened out beyond my own baby, beyond the babies of the world, beyond the people of the world. And now I'm interested in the very planet itself, Pachamama, Gaia-centric. Number 19, I think then is enlightenment. And obviously this is not going to happen to us in every incarnation. It's cumulative. So enlightenment is, for me, sacrament number 19. And it is enlightenment and laughter at the illusion under which we've previously labored. At this stage now, I would be able to offer namaste. The divine in me recognizes and honors the divine in you, but I'm offering this to all sentient beings anywhere in the cosmos, not just on Pachamama, not just on Gaia. So this is very definitely cosmological, Cosmo-centric, where I recognize the divinity in all of manifestation. Sacrament number 20 is death. And this again is Deo-centric, God-centric. I begin to realize again that I'm re-identifying with my soul on the way to identifying with God herself. So sacrament number 20 is really powerful. And it's the one that most people are afraid of, but it's an extraordinarily beautiful transition from the identification, even with the cosmos, to identification with the soul itself. But the journey ain't done. The mission isn't actually complete. There's a sacrament number 21, which is the Bodhisattva vow. The realization that how can I kind of be united again with Source, as long as there are beings who are still stuck in darkness and in the illusion of being separate from God. And so the Bodhisattva vow that you find in Buddhism is the willingness to reincarnate again, even if you've worked off all your own personal karma, even if you're an enlightened being and there is no need for you to come back for yourself, you're coming back for the rest of us. So as long as there's any one being trapped in illusion, the Bodhisattva will come back in order to kind of awaken that individual. So again, once more, it's a cosmocentric kind of a focus. Sacrament number 22, it's, now you're going to once more parachute back into incarnation, and you risk forgetting everything that has gone before. It's like you're starting from ground zero. but it's not really ground zero. It's more like cryptomnesia. Cryptomnesia is where you learn something and then you forget it, and then you kind of encounter it again, and then the second time around, you learn it much more quickly because it's been in there. It's like you learn a language really, really well, you know, you're fluent in it, and then you leave that area and you're away for 40 years and you come back and you don't remember you speak the language, you know, until you're exposed to it, and then suddenly it comes rushing back. So now you're going to accelerate through all of the previous sacraments, through all of the previous stages. You're like a powerful wave recapturing the stranded water droplets from the beach of samsara back into the ocean heart of God herself. And that's truly a cosmological. And then the final sacrament, I believe, number 23, is the realization, to put it in Hindu terms, that the game of Leela is done. You know, God is winding up the game. She's accomplished what she needs. So now all souls merge, and once more, there is only source. It is completely Deo-centric. Where are you today?